Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry. I'm a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher X video. All right, today's video, I saw that Vlogging Through History covered it, and it did pretty well. And I like looking at this kind of stuff because it's called Top 10 World War II Myths That You Believed Because of Hollywood. And it's true. A lot of people's relationship with history is what they see in Hollywood movies. And we know it's not always accurate. So I'm excited to see what they got, and we can talk about the real history behind it. All right, original video will be linked down below. Let's get started. Dude, this is Simon again. Dude, how many channels does Simon freaking Whistler have? Holy crap. This is a channel called TopTenz. I had no idea he was in this. All right, let's see what we got.
During the Second World War, the US government combined with two other major influences of public opinion, Hollywood
We gotta get my helmet on, no way.
to support the war effort. Propaganda flowed through both industries until it saturated American daily life. In Great Britain, Churchill's stirring rhetoric spurred patriotic feeling, affecting the English-speaking peoples on both sides of the Atlantic. In newsreels, films, radio broadcasts, newspaper, and magazines.
Dude, okay, hold on. Okay, other side of the Atlantic, maybe with Canada, maybe. Americans didn't give a crap about any of this at the beginning of the war.
Information about the war supplanted all other news and entertainment. The result was inaccuracies and misinformation entering the public's consciousness, where it has remained ever since. Information meant to boost morale gradually became accepted facts, despite the inherent inaccuracies dictated by war conditions. Many remain in the public mind, though they have long been disproven. Fighting Hollywood has never been easy when attempting to correct the historical record, so here are 10 myths about World War II, either created or long maintained by the entertainment industry.
By the way, I have a question for you guys about history and movies. What do you think is the level of responsibility for filmmakers to not just completely butcher historical, truth in videos? Do you think there's any responsibility there? Do you think it's more just, hey, it's capitalism. You got to make the best movie possible so people will watch it, right? And if you're a super, history nerd, you might be like, it's got to be 100% accurate, but you guys understand that 100% accurate movies for history probably are not actually going to be very good. Anyway, all right, let's see what they got.
Number 10. Americans supported rationing on the home front wholeheartedly. American life during World War II is portrayed in films and television as one of unity and unflagging.
I really feel like this never comes up in any movies anyways, though.
Often, they are depicted humorously, such as films using housing shortages to set up romantic comedies. The effects of rationing, when they are presented at all, are seen as being mere inconveniences. Americans stoically and even enthusiastically supported rationing as their willing contributions to the war efforts, according to film. In reality, rationing was almost universally resented and widely subverted through the black markets which thrived during the war. Hundreds of items were rationed during the war, and ration books and prices changed frequently.
A lot of that was food, oil was a big one too. Food and oil being big ones, as those things needed to get to the front lines.
Americans resented the need to budget both ration coupons and cash to purchase items they perceived to be widely available. Among the items most widely purchased via black markets or counterfeit ration coupons were meat, sugar, and gasoline. One enterprising journalist purchased over a ton of black market beef, all within a 30-mile radius of Pittsburgh, in just a few hours.
He's like, you do know there was that time. I mean, anytime the government asks people to do even the smallest things for the betterment of society, no one's going to tell me what to do, right? That was that guy. I feel like that was this guy right here with his pipe. The government don't tell me what to do.
During the war, the government produced scores of posters denouncing black markets and encouraging Americans to refuse to patronize those merchants who cheated the system. Their insistence and the efforts of the Office of Price Administration, OPA, to suppress black marketeers and rationing cheats throughout the war stand as clear evidence to the range of rationing resistance within America during the war. Number 9.
So my thing isn't even necessarily, after looking at that one, that I disagree with it, but how often do you see rationing really emphasized in war movies, especially American World War II movies? What is one that it really becomes this big thing and the whole country rallies behind it? I can't even think of one. All right, anyways, Germany possessed a highly mechanized army which overwhelmed the Allies early in the war. Okay. All right, we'll see what about this is myth.
Mechanized army which overwhelmed the Allies early in the war. The perception born in the media in the early days of the war that the German army was a heavily mechanized armored juggernaut remains a facet of film set in World War II. When the war began, the German army, the Heer, consisted of about 135 divisions. Only 16 of those divisions were fully mechanized. The others had a few motorized vehicles, such as staff cars for officers and motorcycles for messengers. The German army, which rapidly swept over most of Western and Eastern Europe, was a horse-drawn army. army dependent upon animal transport to move its equipment, supplies, ammunition, and heavy guns.
Well, yeah, but those weren't used in combat. They weren't going out with swords and cavalry charges.
When the Germans invaded France in 1940, the French had more tanks, and most of them were more powerful than their German enemies. They also possessed more heavy guns and about the same number of troops. What allowed the Germans...
Something to remember is that... Oh, look at this guy. Okay, I was wrong. I take back what I was saying about the cavalry. I was going to say, it's actually pretty incredible. The Germans even had tanks with them. Remember the Treaty of Versailles banned the Germans from having tanks. So they had to do that in, secrecy. They were doing that in the 1930s, building that up, and even having that technology the way they did when the war broke out was so pretty impressive. Yeah, I take back my horse thing. When I think of World War II, I think of this. I think of a dude, a sniper, standing on top of a horse and sniping.
Prevail over the French in a relatively short campaign was the highly innovative tactics developed and deployed by the Heer, as well as the air superiority achieved by the Luftwaffe. Yet the image still remains of the highly mechanized German army overwhelming its enemies by sheer number of tanks and armored vehicles. Throughout the war, about 75 to 80% of German combat troops relied on animal transport in the field.
But those aren't for fighting.
To and from the battlefronts. Number 8. The American military...
it's for bringing supplies and stuff. I don't know what they're even talking about here. Okay, I feel like they were like stretching to make this up to 10 myths, you know what I mean? All right, the American military was made up of eager, patriotic volunteers. I mean, okay, a lot of people did, volunteer after, Pearl Harbor, but okay.
It was made up of eager, patriotic volunteers. American conscription during World War II began in 1940, just over 1 year before the attack on Pearl Harbor drew the United States into the war. Following that attack, there was a brief surge of enlistments, but by early 1942, the draft was fully established as the portal of entry into the U.S. military. Americans registered in the draft were assigned a draft number. Numbers to be inducted were selected by lottery drawn at random. Those selected were instructed to report to their draft boards for induction. 2/3 of the American men who served in the military during the war were conscripted, drafted into military service based on needs rather than
Putty Ledbetter.
In comparison, during the Vietnam War, about 1/3 of troops were drafted. Draft exemptions were decided for the most part by the local draft boards. They were made up of prominent local businessmen and political figures. As in all wars in which conscription was used to recruit American troops, there was resistance and abuses of the system were not uncommon. Number 7.
I could see that. I mean, I could see that happening there. Drafts are there's so many like sleazy things that can go around with that. What I mean by that is people being able to get out of the draft for not very good reasons, fake an injury, pay for somebody to go in your stead. Yeah, that was literally a deal. You had that like in the Civil War, so it became a poor person's war, or get a deferment because you are in college, which again made a lot of wars, wars of poor people. But I think a big thing to understand here is how many volunteers there were. A lot more volunteers coming into this, during the war than you did have for other ones. It's not like when Vietnam broke out, people were, lining up to enlist. Anytime you're going to have a draft, you're going to have people that don't want to do that because you're always going to have conscientious objectors and people that just don't want to go fight. Right? Why would you, right? All right. Rommel was an ardent anti-Nazi who opposed Hitler and led a noble campaign with his Africa Corps. Okay, I like this one. Dude, Rommel simps, y'all need to shut up, okay? I hear you online. Stop trying to disassociate him completely, okay? It's the bending backwards that people have for Rommel. Yes, he was an incredible general, but like people will totally turn a blind eye for everything when it comes to Rommel. All right, I like this one.
Rommel was an ardent anti-Nazi who opposed Hitler and led a noble
He was definitely complicit, okay?
Corps. It is true that Erwin Rommel, arguably the most famous German commander during World War II, was not a member of the Nazi Party, but it is equally true that Rommel personally supported Hitler, was a long member of his inner circle, and even commanded his personal guard during the Polish campaign. In film, he is frequently depicted as the brilliant commander of the German Africa Corps.
And he was.
His most brilliant operation was a 1,400-mile retreat, eluding
no one doubts his abilities.
Forces. Rommel's legends began during the war, presented to the German people as propaganda from Joseph Goebbels to raise morale. well. Following the war, British and American sources added to
Goebbels.
the myth of both his battlefield
freak.
brilliance and his participation in the war as a good German, as in a professional officer and a gentleman. The distinction was necessary to the Western Allies in post-war Europe as justification for restoring the West German army, considered a Cold War necessity. Rommel did perform spectacularly in command in France and North Africa
Under the
early in
circumstances.
war, and it was he who supervised the construction of most of the Atlantic Wall, the German defenses against the Allied invasion of France. Yet he fully supported Hitler through most of the war and did not support assassinating the Führer. This legend was born largely through German propaganda, Churchillian rhetoric, and concerted revision of history by the Allies in the post-war era.
Well, one thing I've definitely had to, change my wording and stuff like that is calling the German military like the Nazi military. I used to get caught up in that and just like, and then I remember someone telling me, it's like, dude, and I was young when this happened, but it was like, dude, they're the German military no matter what political parties. The Nazis are a political party. The German military is still the military no matter who it is. And that's true about Rommel. I mean, he's still a general no matter what political party, where it's Nazis or not, right? He's still going to be in that position. So was he a Nazi? I mean, he was still going to be the general no matter what. But yeah, definitely complicit. So removing him completely from the context of Adolf Hitler and all that stuff is not like, it's not accurate. But yeah, sorry, I probably just lost a bunch of subs from the Rommel camp of simps, but I'm mostly messing with y'all though.
Number 6. The Germans were obsessed with George Patton, regarding him as the Allies' most feared commander.
Where I've heard of this is that Hitler was really, really, like, he really respected Patton. But like obsessed, I don't know. But I have heard, that Hitler was into them. And I want to know if that was maybe overblown.
The 1970 Academy Award-winning biopic Patton, starring George C. Scott as the flamboyant American general, depicts an infatuation by his German adversaries with his whereabouts. The portrayal of a German command structure obsessed with the activities of the man they viewed as the most feared of all the Allied commanders. Patton would have certainly endorsed such an image, but post-war analysis has long indicated the Germans held Patton in no such awe. In fact, prior to his assuming command of the Third Army in 1944, they paid little attention to him at all. Patton was a master of self-promotion, one of the first American commanders to include a press officer.
Is there a bigger egomaniac in the history of the United States military than George Patton? Who else would be there? I think MacArthur's up there.
A member of his staff.
No.
He dressed flamboyantly, often wearing riding breeches and boots. He wore ivory-gripped pistols and adopted a highly polished helmet with his general stars prominently displayed. In Sicily, he used his pistols to personally shoot 2 mules blocking a bridge and made certain that war correspondents accompanying his troops knew about it. In a book he wrote, Between the World Wars, The Secret of Victory, Patton wrote, "The leader must be an actor. He is unconvincing.
That's true.
He lives his part."
No leader can be be rizzless. Okay, got to have the charisma. That is true, and he had that.
Patton spent his World War II years living his part, frequently to the exasperation of his superiors. But to his German adversaries, he was simply a prima donna, not a commander that they feared above all others. Number 5. After the fall of France.
So the thing I had heard, and it was probably overblown, was like, you know how Hitler was like, hey, the Allied invasion is going to be at Calais, and that he believed that fully. I've heard, because he's like, Patton's going to go there. You have the whole fake, army that Patton has, the inflatable army. And that was the time when they had sidelined Patton because he messed with that soldier that had PTSD and had to be sidelined a little bit. But that was probably overblown. That's like the reason why Hitler left Normandy rather undefended or less defended and put everything in Calais was because it looked like that Patton was going to be there. I could see that being a myth. Anyways, after the fall of France, Great Britain stood alone against Germany. Well, in the West, but yeah, I mean, everybody forgets about the Soviet Union. It's like maybe it's part of the Red Scare, but yeah.
Great Britain stood alone against Germany. In film after film depicting the fall of France.
I got to interject with this too. The other thing that should be, of course, talked about this is the resistance movements going on out the whole time. Poland continued to resist. You had French resistance as well. So
at the beginning of the Battle of Britain, emphasis is placed on the British standing alone against the might of Germany and
that's British propaganda, huh?
The myth of Britain's lone stand against what Churchill described as Nazi tyranny began with his speeches to Parliament and to the British people at the time. In many of them, he was actually speaking to the American American people, hoping through his rhetoric to exploit traditional American sympathy for the underdog.
We're all
Britain
alone.
did not stand alone following their
We'll work
retreat
with
from
Stalin.
Dunkirk and other Channel ports
Work
and
with him.
surrender of the French. In 1940, the British Empire covered more than 25% of the globe. Britain could and did draw resources and men from Canada, India, Asia, South Africa, Rhodesia, Australia, New Zealand, and its islands in the Caribbean and elsewhere.
Like they did in World War One.
Vast reserves of oil.
Probably a bigger impact in a lot of in World War One when they, like what percentage again was like the World War One army made up of actual like Indians.
Rubber, coal, iron ore,
Gallipoli
foodstuffs
with the Aussies and New Zealanders.
Churchill's rhetoric and the jingoistic recording of history in the post-war era led to the creation of the Britain stood alone myth. A simple review of the facts reveals that myth is romantic nonsense.
That's
Even
Chamberlain.
the deservedly idolized pilots of the RAF were not simply British standing.
Oh, okay. Well, 41.
Pilots from South Africa, Rhodesia, Netherlands, Poland, France, Belgium, Canada, and even volunteers from the United States all flew with the Royal Air Force during Britain's darkest hour.
So I guess, at 40, I guess you could say there's more of an argument for it because Operation Barbarossa and the fight's going to be going on in 1941 with the Soviet Union, but. Yeah, so it was propaganda from Churchill.
Before the Battle of Britain was David and Goliath events with the British a decided underdog. During the Battle of Britain, the aerial campaign, which
you guys think this was really perpetuated a lot? I mean, maybe in the context that Britain had been struggling. I mean, they got booted out of Dunkirk and basically mainland Europe. But I mean, I don't know. Was the Royal Air Force, you think, like underrated, appreciated,
attempted to induce Britain to surrender or face invasion, several advantages were held by the British. First, and probably most decisive, was Britain's advanced early warning radar, communications and control systems, which allowed the RAF to scramble fighters and vector them to intercept incoming German aircraft. Chain home stations, made operational just before the war, gave the British a decided advantage, allowing them to keep aircraft on the ground until they were needed, rather than expending precious fuel in patrols. Most of the air-to-air combat which took place during the battle did so in British skies. Men who had to abandon their aircraft and bail out, for the most part, landed in Britain or Scotland, or in the waters nearby. RAF pilots could quickly return to duty once any injuries healed. German pilots,
in the middle, looks so young there.
Most of whom eventually were sent to Canada for the duration. German aircraft consumed considerable amounts of fuel just to arrive over Britain, and were thus limited in the time available for combat before they had to disengage and return to base. The Battle of Britain took its name from yet another speech by Winston Churchill, intended in a decisive defeat for the Germans and humiliation for Hermann Goering.
We will fight in the skies.
A battle
we will
surrounded
fight in the beaches.
But it was never a David versus Goliath affair. About 2,900 fighter pilots flew for the RAF during the battle, roughly the same number as did for the Germans. Of those 2,900, about 20% came from nations other than Britain, including exiled Europeans, pilots from the Empire, and American volunteers. Number 3.
I feel the common denominator here has just been the British propagandized everything in World War II. Number 3, German war crimes were committed by the SS and Gestapo, not the Wehrmacht. Okay, I mean, there's a lot of people. Okay, is this really a myth?
German war crimes were committed by the SS and Gestapo, not the Wehrmacht. Beginning in the
like the military had no clue that it was going on. I mean, it was a military operation. Now, a lot of like the how did he word this? German war crimes. So like, yes, like the SS and Gestapo are going to be a big part of like rounding up and identifying, if they're, I would assume they're talking about the Holocaust here, but identifying those, those people. That was kind of their job, right? Of hunting down those people. But yeah, it's the military is going to be largely are actually conducting it.
Were committed by the SS and Gestapo, not the Wehrmacht. Beginning in the 1950s, as the extent of German war crimes continued to be revealed, the myth of the clean Wehrmacht emerged. Reinforced by films and television programs, the myth holds that the Gestapo and the Waffen-SS committed war crimes across Europe without the participation or even the knowledge of the Wehrmacht. By the way, Wehrmacht refers to the German...
Where's that myth coming from then?
World War II, of the Heer, the Army, the Kriegsmarine, the Navy, and the Luftwaffe, the Air Force. In post-war Europe, as it became apparent the Soviets had no intention of withdrawing from the countries they overran during the war, the Western Allies needed to strengthen
Iron Curtain.
The creation of a West German army was encouraged. With the support of Western leaders, including Eisenhower, the German military was absolved of guilt for war crimes during the war, with all blame being assigned to the Nazi SS and Gestapo. The clean Wehrmacht was born...
Wait, did he say Eisenhower was a big part of this?
leaders, including Eisenhower, the German of a West German army was encouraged. With the support of Western leaders, including Eisenhower, the German military was absolved of guilt for war crimes during the war, with all blame being assigned to the Nazi SS and Gestapo.
Okay.
The Clean Wehrmacht was born out of Cold War necessity. The myth remains.
So that seems like kind of what I was saying, where disassociating the German military with the Nazi party. You're going to have a Wehrmacht, I guess, a German military, regardless of the political party. So trying to disassociate the two. It also seems like that was a little bit of politicking on, say, like the American front and stuff like that, because remember how poorly it ended up with, you know, like the Treaty of Versailles in World War I, where Germany as a whole really was forced to admit guilt for the war, right? Maybe this was a way politically, if you're like trying to think like Eisenhower, to try to not make those mistakes of the past and not just put it on Germany, okay, but on the Nazi party. And with the Nazi party eliminated in the war, that there can be an actual like healing process that Nazi threat is done with and doesn't actually represent Germany as a whole. I could see that being a political maneuver.
But it's false. Here troops engaged in war crimes against civilians from the earliest days of the campaign in Poland in 1939. They were rationalized as necessary for security against partisan attacks or as simply obeying orders, but they were nonetheless war crimes willingly committed. Not every German soldier committed war crimes, of course, but every branch of the German military, as well as the German paramilitary units, did. Number 2, the atomic bomb caused the Japanese to surrender.
Hot take, baby. Okay, now we're getting there. Now, I don't think a single thing I've heard thus far has been a hot take. Like this, like myth that just is completely the wrong part of history. We're getting into some hot takes here. I like that because everybody, of course, is like, what do you mean it was the bombs? There was more to it.
Atomic bomb caused the Japanese to surrender. The Japanese surrendered because of the atomic bombs which fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Every film which covers the end of the Pacific War says so. In many, an image of a mushroom cloud precedes scenes of people celebrating.
People forget the other part.
What isn't covered is the fact that the 2 atomic bombings were not the most devastating bombing raids on Japan during the war.
Nope.
Over 60 Japanese cities had already...
There's another thing people forget. The fire bombings, Tokyo, dwarf this stuff. Yes, these are very powerful because they're like single bombs, but Japan has seen worse. Had seen worse.
Bombing raids, including the dreaded fire bombings, which terrorized the civilian population. There were many factors.
Man, by the way, I've been learning a little bit more about fire bombings and like how they work and how they worked like in Dresden. Have you heard about this? Where like the fire bombings, the bombs become like so hot that there's so much fire that it sucks up oxygen. And it sucks in and becomes like a tornado, literally like fire tornadoes. And these people would like basically get literally like sucked up in it. It was happening at Dresden. And it was so hot that it was also like melting the ground and people were like melting in place inside. I hadn't realized the graphic nature of what firebombing is like with these like, I don't know if it has another term. I just prefer to like as fire tornadoes. It's like the scariest thing I can imagine.
And to accept surrender,
atomic bomb, yeah.
Supposed unconditional surrender included several conditions which they insisted on.
Russian invasion, come on, say it.
On his throne.
Say it.
Was the withdrawal of Soviet troops following their declaration of war on Japan and invasion of Manchuria. The Soviet invasion created a 2-front war for the Japanese, who had already lost their fleet and most of their air forces.
This has been the big thing that people say about the atomic bombs possibly not being necessary. Was the Soviet invasion. They declared war. That was part of the deal going back to the FDR and Stalin era, which was, you know, basically the deal was if the Americans and British would do D-Day, that the Soviets would help with Japan. And Soviets had been fighting Japan in Asia. But yeah, in the same day, basically, in the same day or two of when the bombs were used, the Soviets had announced their declaration, or they were already kind of fighting Japan, but like, hey, we're going to invade and we're mobilizing for, you know, moving into East Asia. And a lot of people say that was the bigger thing, actually. So it's debatable, though. It's absolutely debatable.
Japan was
anybody that's saying it's clear one way or the other. I wouldn't try. I think it's somebody trying to make a name for themselves. All these things are in there. We just probably don't know enough, but it wasn't just the atomic bombs, and maybe it wasn't the biggest thing, but I don't know. I'm still unconvinced. I'm still thinking I gotta just look a little bit deeper, I think.
before the atomic bomb was dropped, though the two bombings and the threat of more to come certainly helped convince them to stop fighting a war they'd clearly lost. They had no food, no oil, and few medicines. It was clear by then to even the most rabid warmonger among them that the Americans would not quit and the Russians were coming.
So one of the arguments, I guess you would say, that supports that is, if it was truly about the atomic bombs and seeing their devastation, then why didn't the Japanese surrender sooner? Why did they not surrender after that, the first bomb? And then even immediately after the second bomb? Was it then that, the two things put together? It's always the safe answer. What I mean by that is the bombs plus the Russian invasion. But it wasn't an immediate surrender. And that was something the Americans were expecting. That's why they did the second bomb. They were expecting an immediate one, and again, only waited 3 days.
In the end, it was the emperor who agreed to surrender and speak directly to his people for the first time in history. Number 1. Hitler's biggest mistake was a repeat of Napoleon's invading Russia in 1941.
Okay. So
Number 1.
Right.
Hitler's biggest mistake was a repeat of Napoleon.
Okay, I can get behind this because, yes, it was an awful mistake. But to say that Hitler lost because of, Stalingrad or just repeating into Russia, yeah, that's probably an overstatement, right?
Napoleon's invading Russia in 1941. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941 was not just a mistake, it was the opening salvo in what became a series of mistakes.
They can't say it wasn't a big deal, though,
for the rest of the war. The invading Germans carried no winter uniforms or equipment, expecting a quick campaign. They had reason to expect such, as up until then all of their land campaigns had been successful, completed quickly and efficiently. Obviously, the war with the Soviets broke that mold, but it was not Hitler's biggest mistake. That error was his decision to declare war on the United States in December 1941 in accordance with his perception of the Tripartite Pact.
Let me go back.
That mold, but
I decide if I agree with this.
Completed quickly and efficiently. Obviously, the war with the Soviets broke that mold, but it was not Hitler's biggest mistake. That error was his decision to declare war on the United States in December 1941 in accordance with his perception of the Tripartite Pact.
Really? Do you think so? Do you agree with Simon on this? The invasion... Declaring war on the United States was a worse mistake than invading Russia? No. Any of you behind that? But the Russians whooped on them. So they lost everything. Not against the Americans. Okay.
Interestingly, the Japanese...
Anyone backing me up on this? Let me know.
War on the Soviet Union, then at war with Germany. Hitler declared war, even though American President Franklin D. Roosevelt had not mentioned Germany or Hitler in his declaration of war.
But here's the thing, too. Americans didn't even care that the Germans declared war after after Pearl Harbor. Americans didn't care. They're like, no, whatever. Like, they didn't fight. They weren't even fighting them. Okay, they went North Africa and all that stuff, but it's not like they declared war on the United States and then D-Day comes the day after. Like, no, that was years later. Yeah, I don't know if I can get behind this.
American outrage was directed at Japan, not Germany. Hitler made it easy for Roosevelt and the United States to enter the war and adopt the policy of destroying Germany first. Hitler's rash.
I also am not convinced that even if Germany didn't declare war on the United States wouldn't have joined anyways.
Sure that the Allies would gain control of the Atlantic sea lanes and the industrial
like it would have kept them out of the war.
States would arm his enemies. Already in a death grip with the Soviet Union, the Germans then faced the largest industrial economy in the world. His attack on the Soviet Union ensured a long and brutal war. His declaration of war on the United States would ensure he would lose it.
All right, final thoughts. All right, so the video started off super slow, and we finally started getting some hot takes at the end there. And that last one, man, I don't know, you guys. Am I being naive to think that the biggest mistake was declaring war on the United States, not the invasion of the Soviet Union? Maybe I'm crazy. All right. Anyways, I'm going to need some feedback. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm an idiot. So I don't know. So anyways, I think the ones I've been most interested in hearing back from you guys were the last two. Was it more for the surrender of Japan? Was it more do you think the atomic bombs or the addition of the Soviet Union, getting ready to invade and declaring that they were going to invade, and then the last one here about declaring war on the United States? Okay, I want your feedback. I'm going to read in the comments. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.